Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome the secretaries and administrator to the committee. Mr. LaHood, it's great to see you back in the Congress. I represent the San Joaquin Valley in California. A lot of farming happens there, and there's a lot more my constituents are worrying about than global warming. Right now, we've got an imposition from the Endangered Species Act that shut down the pumps in the Delta, and a lot of my farmers are getting a zero allocation this year. It's costing 40 to 60,000 jobs, and it's going to result in about a $9 billion loss in the state's industry. And I honestly think that my state is suffering more from environmental alarmism than it is global warming. And added to that, this concept of cap and trade, to me, just seems to make the problem worse. Secretary Chu, welcome. I noticed that there was you paid a visit to California recently. I think you were quoted in the LA Times saying that because of global warming, agriculture in California was going to be gone in about 30 years. And one other quote, and I just want to have a dialogue on this, was a quote that somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to levels in Europe, which at the time was $8 a gallon. My concern for my constituents is that if you adopt something like a cap and trade system, I don't see how you can, the math doesn't work. You add a price of gas onto the fact that we have a man-made drought in California taking the water away. You increase the price of the gallon of gas or diesel from $5, back up to $6 a gallon the way it was last year. You're going to see the state's largest industry, $90 billion, of the main supplier of fruits and vegetables to the nation, farm out. And if you don't like the fact that 70% of your energy comes from foreign countries, how would you like to have 70% of your food supply leave the country? Because that's what's happening in my neck of the woods. I, for the life of me, can't figure out how you think that you can do something like this without dramatically increasing the debt, national debt, and deficit by subsidizing a false economy and by raising the price to consumers on energy. I think when the public finds out the true cost of this thing, you're going to see a smackdown that the World Wrestling Federation would be proud to see by the public toward this plan, which is unreasonable. I think research, developing efficiencies in energy, and smoothing this transition to another source of fuel, I think is a great idea. But this cap and trade notion, once the public finds out that their prices in the home and at the fuel pump they're not going to buy this. This will stop. This will not go anywhere when you see the true cost of this thing come down. In the energy portfolio of the United States, 70% of it consists of fossil fuels, 20% is nuclear, 10% is renewable, and of that renewable portion, 10% is hydroelectricity. That's about 3%. So you're proposing to take 7% of our energy portfolio and make it how much, how long, and I guess my question to anybody who's going to answer this is, what do you think is going to be the cost to the household? Because I see numbers of $3,000 or over $3,000 to the cost of this plan to the household. And then we've talked about the high price of gas, Secretary Chu, $8 or whatever. I mean, you know, it's an increase on the energy supply to the United States. How on earth do you think you can pull this off without breaking the back of the government and of the consumer?
I'll go first, and I'll turn it over to the Secretary. EPA's modeling shows not at all those cost ranges, sir. It shows $98 to $140 for the average household per year, not $3,000. That is a misstatement of an MIT study that actually shows something.
In your opinion, I mean,
well, in your
opinion, I mean, I'm not sure I trust you for the facts as much as I would trust that study. How can I know I mean, how do I know your modeling is correct? And what are your assumptions? What are you basing? You mentioned 40% goes back of the cap and trade revenues to the household. How does that work? How does that happen?
The history of EPA's modeling shows that we are usually conservative, that we usually overestimate the cost, not underestimate.
How does that 40% get back to the consumer that you're talking
Gentleman's
about?
time has expired. If let the witness, well, the witness will have a chance to answer briefly.
If you could answer, how does that 40% get back?
The 40% was modeled as a rebate back to American consumers, to American households. That's what we were
In
asked
a
to
check in the
model.
mail?
It gets back to the, I don't know that we,
Could you let me know how that gets back to the consumer, please?
Sir, it's not my decision to make. We were
Well, then
asked
maybe
to
you'd
model.
better remodel so you can explain to people how that's going to get back in their pockets.
Will the gentleman yield to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Will the gentleman yield to?
Yes.
I just.
Well, I don't have any time left, but I'm happy to.
The statement about California agriculture being gone, that wasn't because of the bill. That was because of global warming. Is that
An
correct?
interpretation of the results of global warming 40 years from now.
Actually,
fairly put.
If that was the quote, it was inaccurate because I know about this. I was citing some studies, two studies, in fact, of predictions of what will happen if we continued on a business as usual model. And those studies said, and they took two scenarios. An optimistic scenario, you keep the carbon below 500 parts per million. It's a target that we're all trying to work towards. And in that study, in the first part of this century, by 2050, the snowpack in California will be reduced in the optimistic scenario by 26%. We will have 74% of the snowpack that we had today. And in the more pessimistic scenario, business as usual scenario, it would be down to 60%. By the end of this century, the 21st century, it's considerably less, as much as 93% decrease in the snowpack of California if we continued as business as usual and so it was that concern for the agriculture of California that I was speaking of.
And I respect that, if I can respond, Mr. Chairman. Environmental alarmism in the form of Endangered Species Act that is a runaway locomotive, and the cost of this cap and trade system will kill agriculture long before global warming does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.